Does radiation affect everyone the same?
No, actually, children are at much higher risk of radiation health effects because their cells are dividing much more rapidly. They're growing. And so the unborn child is the most at risk, but all the way through teenage and adolescence, children are more vulnerable to the impact of radiation. What is the impact of radiation? Radiation impacts our cells, specifically the DNA in our cells is the most vulnerable. It randomizes DNA. If the cell is damaged and dies, our body can usually absorb it if there's just a little bit. We're not talking acute radiation exposure here. We're talking about rather low levels of radiation like X-rays. But so the outcome, if the cell dies, is good. There's no damage, there's no problem, the body absorbs it. If the damage, however, is such that it doesn't kill the cell and the damage stays there, it can result in other impacts like cancer, both fatal and non-fatal. It can result in birth defects. It can result in problems that prevent the ability to have children, either because the eggs and sperm are affected or because the whole child is impacted, and miscarriage is one of the outcomes from radiation. So children are much higher risk. Elders are also at a higher risk because their bodies are less able to repair the damage. Sometimes the damage is so severe to a cell the cell dies. Sometimes the damage is so light that the body can actually repair it. So it's the ranges in the middle that cause the most problems. And then, in addition to young people and elders, women are also more vulnerable to radiation health impacts because we have so much more reproductive tissue, and the reproductive tissue is more sensitive to these types of impacts. So women have actually a 50% greater chance of getting cancer from the type of radiation exposure that we're talking about, just sitting in their car next to a nuclear shipment that's in a tie-up. The shipment is just fine. It wasn't in the accident at all. The container is perfect, and the radiation that's coming off of that container is a higher risk for children and for women because there's no safe dose.
And what if there was an accident and this trailer flipped over and one of the barrels cracked open?
Cracked open is an immediate danger to everybody in the vicinity. Cracked open with a diesel fire or some other flammable material becomes an off-site contamination that could affect many square miles with particles of plutonium and highly radioactive fuel, billions of dollars of cost in remediation, and an unknown number of health consequences because the thing about cancer is it's really the perfect crime. You can't prove 20 years later that a cancer was caused by a particular incident in someone's life. Can't prove that it wasn't, but it's an unknown outcome in terms of the people who would be impacted.
And is leukemia part of that illness scenario?
Leukemia is more common from the types of radioactivity that come out of an operating nuclear power plant. I'm not going to say it's out of the question with a waste accident, but solid tumor cancers are more likely.
And how long does radioactive waste stay toxic?
Radioactive waste is toxic virtually forever. The very short-term radioactivity is present, but plutonium has a half-life of 24,000 years, and it's 1% of the waste. It's a big problem in the waste. In order to get radioactivity down to a level that is hard to detect, you need 10 to 20 half-lives, so 240,000 years for plutonium. There are other fission products in the waste that have half-lives in the millions of years. It's virtually forever.
And is uranium in this waste too?
Yes, however, the half-life of U-238 is the age of this planet. We have had one half-life as a planet, and it's sort of a cosmic joke that the nuclear age appeared as we crossed that boundary.
So since this lasts so long, is there any possible way of cleaning it up efficiently if there is a spill?
Radioactivity is simply moved from one place to another. It is a physical process which our species has not yet figured out how to impact. So it decays at the half-life rate that it has. And basically, if it's in one place and you want to, quote, clean that place up, you're going to contaminate a different place. You can put it in containers, but how long will the containers last compared to the radioactivity is an open question. So this whole issue of the radioactive waste sitting at the reactor sites and possibly being sent to South Carolina is a very interesting set of variables, because this stuff is going to be a problem no matter where it is. But in South Carolina, they intend to do something even worse with it, which is to intentionally chop it up and dissolve it in acid so that they can remove the plutonium from the waste. It doesn't reduce the radioactivity at all, and it results in pure plutonium, which is weapons usable in nuclear weapons. And it leaves 99% of the waste that has still waste, still has to be isolated from our environment in some way. And that is the second part of this story.
So say South Carolina gets all the nation's waste, then what do they do with the leftovers? What are some proposals of what to do with the leftovers?
Well, the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future is to make recommendations on what to do with the nation's waste, whether it's reprocessed or not. And that is a big question that we're waiting to see if they recommend that recycling or not. If they do, South Carolina is virtually the only place it would occur in the United States, which places Western North Carolina not only on the highway on the way to South Carolina, but close to this recycling site, with a site here that in the 1980s was being studied as a national nuclear waste dump. It is a site that is a larger area than an area called Sandy Mush on the French Broad River, but that site was being studied in the 1980s by the Department of Energy as one of 10 granite repository sites. And because it is so close to South Carolina, the people here are very concerned that if the waste is trucked through and taken to South Carolina for processing, that the leftovers could be shipped right up the hill on this nice big fat highway that they've just built called I-26. And US 25 is also being brought up to limited access highway, a parallel that goes out of Greenville right up to the same area. So those two roads are really the largest evidence that this plan is moving forward, but it's certainly far from an official proposal. It is, however, the case that we are the closest site that's been considered for a high-level nuclear waste dump to the South Carolina processing site.
What can we do to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, because the people in the business community of South Carolina volunteered, we are working in a campaign here in Western North Carolina to send emails to the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future at this juncture to say we are not volunteering, that we in fact fought in the 1980s, we stopped the dump then, and we will fight again. And so the email address is brc@nuclear.energy.gov. And that stupid dot in the middle is causing everybody a lot of grief because it doesn't work without it. So again, brc@nuclear.energy.gov. And the emails are important because we want to show up in their system as having clearly stated that we are not volunteering.
How does an email compare to a snail mail letter?
They prefer email, and they will scan snail mail, and it will all be posted on their website. And so do not include information you do not want posted on the World Wide Web.
What should we put in it?
I think the most important things that we should put in it are statements about the fact that we do not want this nuclear waste here in Western North Carolina, and we will do everything in our power to fight any formal proposal that would put it